I'm Mark Golub, and this primary season continues to be just unbelievable in so many ways. On the one hand, the pundits, the experts, have been wrong time and time again. On the Democratic side, first the experts underestimated the excitement generated by Bernie Sanders and seemed to be so impressed by his tying Hillary Clinton in Iowa and then trouncing her in New Hampshire. And there were experts on television and in print and online who suggested that Sanders was as revolutionary on the Democratic side as Donald Trump was on the Republican side. But after South Carolina and Nevada, when Hillary Clinton demolished Bernie Sanders, as the experts had once predicted she would before Iowa, reality has set in on the Democratic side, and it is clear that Hillary Clinton and not Bernie Sanders will be the Democratic nominee in the general election. Sanders may have excited some young people and far-left Democratic socialists, but he clearly does not speak to middle-aged and older African Americans who support Hillary Clinton with a ratio of 6-1. It was exciting to think that Bernie Sanders might have a shot after all. And I spoke to many, many Jews who supported Bernie Sanders and were only lukewarm regarding Hillary Clinton. But Democrats will rally around their nominee, and they will support Hillary Clinton after the Democratic Convention in July in Philadelphia. And then there's the Republican primary. And oh my goodness, even devoted Republicans are acknowledging that things have gotten out of hand and are, to many people, simply embarrassing. On the one hand, the dirty tricks by the Ted Cruz campaign, for which he has apologized on stage and for which he fired his director of communications, undermines so much of his stature and his claim to be the honest candidate. While the back and forth between Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, which began on the last debate stage and which continues in their respective rallies, is something which no one has ever seen in a presidential or primary contest. You know, it's one thing for a candidate to run a negative ad and to say critical things about an opposing candidate. That happens all the time, every election cycle. But the quality, the style of bickering that has gone on between Rubio and Trump has been described by many, including by many Republicans, as schoolyard in nature. The size of a candidate's ears, the kind of tan he has, whether one wets his pants or whether one sweats too much, it's all too much. And then this weekend, the bombshell. If you've been a regular viewer of JBS, you know I've been very careful here on JBS to speak out against ad hominem attacks on any candidate, including Donald Trump. Many American Jews find Donald Trump totally unacceptable and unqualified to be president of the United States. Most of those Jews, by the way, are Democrats. So there's nothing surprising in their dismissal of Donald Trump. And it's clear that many pundits in the media and many Democrats have failed to understand the appeal of Donald Trump at a time when the general electorate is furious at the political establishment of both parties and gravitate towards Donald Trump because they believe he cannot be bought as other politicians are bought, that he knows a great deal about business and the economy, and because he projects a strength that appeals to many, many Americans, Democrats as well as Republicans, who've seen President Obama projecting a weakness and as one who has injured America's standing throughout the world. And many American Jews are terribly disappointed in President Obama for the diplomatic stand he's taken on Israel and the Middle East, and they've been dismayed by his playing to the Muslim Brotherhood and the Arab Muslim world. So while Donald Trump's critics say he will only win undereducated, blue-collar workers, and that women and Hispanics will never support him, Donald Trump goes out and wins every demographic in Nevada, including well-educated, college voters, including women, and even winning 46% of the Hispanic vote in Nevada after experts, even here on JBS, predicted that he would win fewer than the 17% of Hispanics which Mitt Romney won 4 years ago. The experts simply don't get it. People don't believe Donald Trump is going to round up 11 million illegal immigrants, or that he's going to work to really ban all Muslims from entering the United States. People just don't believe it. They don't believe he's a bigot who hates Mexicans. Obviously, 45% of Latinos didn't view him that way in Nevada. And they don't believe he hates women. But they see him as a candidate who thumbs his nose against political correctness, who speaks in hyperbole, but projects an aura of strength which good people, educated good people, women, find enormously appealing in an era of total disdain for the politicians of this country, and, by the way, for the media, which is horrifically biased and prejudicial. And so Donald Trump looks like he is poised to do extremely well tomorrow on Super Tuesday, and then again in Florida on March 15th. And if he does both, Donald Trump will have pulled off a political miracle and will be the Republican candidate opposing Hillary Clinton in the general election in November. That's what it's looked like until this weekend. Many people have wondered if Donald Trump will ever do anything to derail his campaign, especially when a series of statements that the media and Democrats and even some Republicans have found astounding, if not outrageous, although none of them have so far slowed Donald Trump down until this weekend, when everything may have changed. David Duke of the KKK endorsed Donald Trump. And to the utter shock of any American who may have been considering voting for Donald Trump, Mr. Trump refused to disavow the endorsement of David Duke and the KKK, saying on CNN that he did not know who David Duke was. He did not know who David Duke was or which group had endorsed him. Donald Trump does not know who David Duke is. No one on Donald Trump's staff was there to tell him, to explain to him how critical it was for Trump to reject an endorsement from the KKK, which lynched African Americans, burned African Americans, and which murdered Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney. No one on Donald Trump's staff was smart enough, moral enough, sensitive enough, savvy enough to explain to Donald Trump the heinousness of the KKK and who David Duke is? No one on Donald Trump's staff, let alone Donald Trump himself, understands that America cannot have a president who doesn't know who David Duke is, or who fails to understand the unmitigated evil of the KKK. And suddenly that's where we are now, as we prepare for Super Tuesday and for the Florida and Ohio elections 2 weeks from now. Well, for some added perspective and opinion on the primaries and this entire issue, I am so pleased to welcome back to JBS one of the leading journalists in the Jewish community and a dear friend, Jonathan Mark, Associate Editor and columnist for the Jewish Week of New York. Jonathan, thank you again for joining us. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was an excellent introduction of framing what's going on. But I have to say, I disagree with you here and there, if you don't mind.
I would love to hear where you disagree. That'll be fun for me.
Okay. You mentioned how Donald Trump doesn't seem to know who David Duke is and the KKK. Meanwhile, in 2008, Obama was endorsed and was on a friendly basis with the publisher of the Electronic Intifada, a pro-Intifada journal coming out of Chicago. He went to parties with that guy. They celebrated Rashid Khalidi's going to Columbia. He was on a personal basis with the Electronic Intifada people, which is far more than Trump is with Duke. And that didn't seem to bother anybody in 2008. It was hardly even reported, right? Now, also, Hillary Clinton and David Sanders and Bernie Sanders both have met with Al Sharpton, the central figure of the anti-Semitism in the Crown Heights riot of 91. That doesn't seem to bother anybody on the same level. So I think that there's enough of this to go around. And I agree with you. It's embarrassing what's happening in the Republican Party in terms of the cheap language. It's disgraceful. On the other hand, I remember last summer, wasn't Prime Minister Netanyahu called the barnyard epithet, regarding chickens by the White House?
First of all, I don't see how the comments you just made speak at all to anything I said about Donald Trump. All you're adding is that there are other problems with other candidates. You have not spoken to whether you are equally offended by the. Let me finish, Jonathan.
Right.
That you are equally offended and basically that it would be very difficult for Jonathan Mark to support any candidate beyond Donald Trump, any candidate who said he didn't know who David Duke was, whether he does or not, and who isn't ready to repudiate instantly the KKK. Now, there's a distinction in my mind between the examples you gave and this one. And by the way, I am very sympathetic to your larger point, and I have been critical of the media. You heard me say a moment ago, I feel they are heinously, horribly biased and prejudicial, and they have lost the journalistic integrity that once was represented by the great networks and their news organizations and by the New York Times and other papers of stature. However, there are many Americans, Jonathan, even American Jews, who feel that whatever Obama did, whether it was with Bill Ayers, Khalidi, or Jeremiah Wright, there are Americans, American Jews, Jonathan, who do not feel that this was beyond the pale. And they were willing to either overlook or excuse what Obama did. And you gave another example, which is escaping me at the moment. Oh, the example of Sharpton. There are many Americans and many American Jews who look at Sharpton and believe he represents a major portion of the African American community today, and whether people like him or don't like him, he has a legitimacy on the American scene to many American Jews. By the way, I have enormous problems with Sharpton, and I don't understand how in the world he maintained any credibility or stature after the Tawana Brawley fiasco, where he was intimately involved in a lie to the American people. Those, however, are very different than the KKK. I don't know any American, Jonathan. I know no American Jew, Jonathan, who would ever find a reason to be nice in their comments about the KKK or about David Duke. There is such a significant distinction between the KKK and even Khalidi, and certainly with Sharpton, that I am really surprised that that's the argument you would use at the moment to in any way, I don't know, soften the criticism of Donald Trump. And now I'll listen to you.
Okay, now you're correct about that, and I agree with you about that. On a deeper level, most Americans don't feel safe. They don't feel safe about migrants. They don't feel safe about ISIS. They don't feel safe about a lot of things in the world right now. And so, so at a certain point, it doesn't matter. These things don't matter. I'm not saying it shouldn't matter, but it doesn't matter. The same way that there are certain things that make or break different segments. In other words, if you would tell a feminist that somebody is against abortion, they would say, okay, that's the end of the discussion. And if you would say to a gay person he's against gay marriage, that would be the end of the discussion. Nothing else will matter. So even if that person, I think for a lot of people who don't feel safe, things don't matter except their basic one-line issue. They want to feel safe. They want to feel safe economically. They want to feel safe with borders. They want to feel safe with a lot of things going on in the world right now. And I find, frankly, the people on the left who are so comfortable with Hamas and with a lot of radical issues in the world, that to me is the KKK also. And there's plenty of that to go around, among American Jews included. So so to me, at this point, in a world of in this witch's brew of politics, no one thing offends me to the point where I can't keep the discussion going, because everybody, I think, is willing to offend me to places I never thought imaginable 15, 20 years ago. Okay. Every single one of them.
Okay. I want to push you a little more. It's interesting. You and I agree on so many things, and we certainly agree on how you and I react to Americans and American Jews in particular who don't understand who Hamas is, who Hezbollah is, who are disappointed in the stands that J Street takes all the time. And J Street, once again, is involved in an effort to block a bill in Congress, Jonathan, that would say that the Congress is not going to do business with countries that support BDS, even whether it's West Bank or Israel proper. It is astounding to me, the J Street position, and the fact that there are not only Jews, Jonathan, there are rabbis who support J Street's position. So you and I agree totally. And by the way, for me personally, it is very difficult for me to support any candidate who would not condemn Hamas and condemn Hezbollah and say unequivocally that the United States of America should stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, and there should be no diplomatic daylight, because when there is, it emboldens the Palestinians and makes them more intransigent. And the Palestinians have taken one position, Jonathan, since 1937 and 1938. They will never share the land with the Jews, and therefore the notion of a two-state solution is not made impossible by anything in the Jewish world, not by any prime minister of Israel, not by any settlement policy. The two-state solution is not possible because one of the parties refuses to share the land. So all that you and I agree to. Having said that, here's where I'm going to push you. Are you saying to me that as much as you would never support a candidate who supports Hamas or who doesn't condemn BDS, are you saying equally you could support a presidential candidate who doesn't condemn the KKK? Are you saying?
Not. I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
The question is, I'm down to nobody then. I have nobody to vote for.
By the way,
come November.
Good
right?
for
Or come
you,
the
John. Because
primaries.
yes,
So
Jonathan,
what am I supposed to do? At some point, I have to vote for somebody
Yes.
unless I'm going to stay home.
Okay, one of
So
the questions I had for you was, where do the Republicans go now? And where do American Jews who have been disappointed in the Democratic Party and feel it's gone too far left and are not thrilled by Hillary Clinton, and many Jews tell me they're going to vote for Hillary Clinton, but they're not doing it happily. What's the alternative? First, Jonathan, just in the Republican Party. If you were advising somebody who said to you, I am a die-hard Republican, Jonathan Mark, whom should I vote for? What would you say?
I think that Governor Kasich is a grown-up.
I agree.
I think Ted Cruz loves Israel with a tremendous passion, and he would stand by Israel no matter what. I heard him at the ZOA dinner a year ago, and he spoke so passionately about Israel. And he knew the names of Jews who were murdered by terrorists without looking at notes. He knew their names. He knew their stories. He cared about them. He cares about, I feel he cares about us, if I may say us. And I think he's a good man. I think that Rubio is a very good-hearted person. I think these are good people. They are degraded by association against their will with Donald Trump. But I think if they had a chance to debate and have a campaign, the three of them alone, I don't think we'd be hearing all the schmutz and embarrassment that's going on.
Jonathan, who won the Iowa Republican primary?
Who won Iowa? Cruz.
Not to me. Cruz stole Iowa.
Right.
Cruz told a lie about Ben Carson in 1,500 precincts. And as Karl Rove pointed out, if only 4 Republican voters changed their vote because of that Cruz lie, that would be 6,000 votes that Cruz would not have had. And he beat Donald Trump by less than 6,000, by 5,000 something. If Cruz had not lied, Donald Trump would have won Iowa, Trump won New Hampshire, Trump won Nevada, and my problem is, you heard me say, Cruz not only lied about Carson, his campaign has forced him to fire a communications director for the most heinous, sleazy political tactics. And you and I have seen elections, countless elections. We know dirty tricks. But you can't go on before the American people and tell us how much character you have, and then do what Ted Cruz does. And on the Sunday show on Fox, he got furious with Chris Wallace because Chris Wallace asked him about these dirty tricks. Well, I have been very impressed when I hear Cruz speak about Israel. I've had the opportunity to interview him a number of times. He's very, very good on Israel. But I'm not sure he can be president of the United States. I'm not sure.
I agree with that, too. And one thing I was even talking about earlier today with somebody, how it's amazing how all these people with very little experience in government are running for president.
Yes.
I mean, Cruz is a first-term guy.
Yes.
Rubio is first term.
Yes.
Carson is no term.
Right.
So it's kind of like, Bernie Sanders seems like he's first discovered, the international news, 2 months ago.
Yes.
So this is unbelievable when you look back
right.
at. I wasn't able to vote then, but in 1960, when John Kennedy was the rookie of about 10 different candidates at one point, and he already served in Congress longer than all these guys combined.
Mm-hmm.
So something is really disturbing, and I think so. The breakdown in the current political culture is reflected that even the people who are running are the leftovers or the rookies, and something's very disturbing about that.
I agree 100% with you that Kasich is the grown-up with experience. I thought he did extremely well in the last two debates. The media gave him no credit, and the public does not give him any credit. But Jonathan, what happens in your mind if no candidate on the Republican side wins enough wins enough delegates to have the nomination sewed up before Cleveland? And in July, there's a Cleveland Republican convention that is open and brokered. Whom do you think then will emerge as the Republican candidate?
If I may preface that thought, that I think what this election is teaching us on both sides, on both parties, is that we need a return to the smoke-filled.
I've heard that from others as well, Jonathan.
This is a reformer fantasy that they've inflicted on us, and we thought this was a great idea. But this is what a runaway populist electorate can do. They could vote for Donald Trump. They could give us Huey Long. They can give us who knows what. And that's very scary. The same way with all the executive actions done by the president. You know, Roosevelt did the Japanese internment, which everybody says is one of the worst things anybody did in the 20th century. He did that by executive action without congressional vote. So there are things that have to be reformed very seriously to preserve the democracy. And number one, in terms of this, is that there has to be a greater balance between the superdelegates and what the people say in the primary. And I'm counting on the superdelegates here to be some kind of firewall. And that's and it's tragic. What can I tell you? This is tragic.
Okay. Well, I now hope that John Kasich is taken very seriously at the convention.
I do too.
And
he is I think he is now. He's turning into the great white hope.
I hope
so. And I think, and I put him. But on the other hand, he's a terrible campaigner.
Yes.
You know, he can't light a fire under anybody.
I simply want there to be two legitimate candidates running in the next general election. Jonathan, I'm out of time. I love speaking to you, and you've made some wonderful points. And you know, I love seeing you. I want you in studio in the very near future. And you continue to do extraordinary work at the Jewish Week. Thank you, my friend, for being part of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. I really appreciate it. I love you as well. I really love what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Jonathan Mark, associate editor and columnist for the Jewish Week of New York, who again does fabulous work. You should read him as much as possible. So please, how do you see the primaries in both parties, and how do you feel about Donald Trump? Please be in touch with me this week. You can email me, write me, post on our Facebook page, or tweet me. I look forward to reading your thoughts. My thanks, as always, to Sloan Copeland, our director, production coordinator Serge Goldberg, JBS's Associate Director, Dara Golub, and the producer of this edition of Election 2016, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.